In a city built from light and code, a place where you influence is the only thing you really own, some stories never get told out loud. They just sort of exist, in the silence between the posts. This is one of those stories. It's about a connection that grew in the dark, and the digital fire it was always going to start. So, welcome to Nova-Cité. And you have to understand what that quote means. It means algorithms can build you an empire, or they can shatter your life overnight. It means a story, blasted out to a million screens, becomes more real than whatever actually happened. Here, the digital world isn't just a reflection of life. For all intents and purposes, it is life. And this entire reality, it was dominated by two opposing forces, locked in this kind of digital Cold War for the soul of the city itself. A war fought, not with guns, but with hashtags, with trending topics. A war for what you believed every single time you scrolled. Okay, so on one side, you have Block Orion. Think of them as the raw pulse of the streets. Rappers, streamers. Their power was authenticity, and it came from the ground up. And on the other side? The Valmont Dynasty. Polished, powerful, a political machine that basically owned the official story. Their power came from the top down. See, they weren't just opponents. They were like two incompatible operating systems trying to run on the same machine. You just know it's going to crash. At the very center of Block Orion was this guy, Noé. And he wasn't a leader, not in the traditional sense. He was more like a frequency. His live streams were like these citywide confessions. He gave a voice to people who felt forgotten, and he turned all their frustration into this kind of raw poetry. Now, the establishment, they saw him as a public menace, but to a whole generation of kids, he was the only one telling anything close to the truth. And then there was Lina. To the whole world, she was a Valmont, the perfect political heiress being groomed for this legacy she never even asked for. But in the anonymous corners of the internet, she had a whole other life. She was a street photographer. Her account was viral, but nobody knew it was her. And the irony? The people she was capturing, these unlit truths of the city, were the very people her family was fighting against. So you have these two people whose public lives are separated by this firewall of politics and bad blood. But in the quiet, anonymous space of a private chat, something else starts to grow. Something real. Something that had absolutely nothing to do with their last names. It all started with just a single share. Noé, the voice of the streets, he posts one of her anonymous photos. And his caption, it didn't just say he liked it. He understood it. And for Lina, that was everything. For the first time, someone saw the truth in her work without the filter of her family's name. So she sent him a message. And you know how it goes. At first, they just talked about art, but pretty soon it went deeper. It drifted into the fears they both had, but never talked about. And then, eventually, they talked about how lonely it is to be a symbol for other people. For weeks, they built this incredibly fragile, intense thing in the late-night quiet with no idea, absolutely no idea, that in the real world, they were supposed to be enemies. But of course, in a city of screens, no secret stays secret for long. A private truth is really just a public scandal waiting to happen. And when theirs finally broke, it wasn't a spark. It set their entire world on fire. The moment they find out, it happens in silence. There are no cameras, no audience, just the crushing weight of those names. Orion. Valmont. He is the enemy she was raised to hate. She is a system he was born to fight. And in that quiet moment, that world they built together just dissolves, replaced by the static of reality. And that question right there, that's what defines the rest of their story. Because their connection, it wasn't theirs anymore. It was about to be twisted into ammunition for a war that neither of them even started. The fallout was just instant, and it was brutal. The media cooked up a scandal. Their own followers demanded they pick a side, that they denounce the other person. What they felt for each other privately became a political liability. And suddenly, their names weren't just names anymore. They were battle lines. The entire city split in two. Hashtag boycott Orion painted him as a traitor. Hashtag Valmont Corumpus branded her a spy. And all the nuance, everything real about their connection was just erased, flattened into code for a war being fought by total strangers. So, they meet one last time, high above all that noise, on some forgotten rooftop. They're not symbols up there. They're not avatars. They're just two people, caught in a storm that's way too big for them to control. And those words just hang there in the cold air. The world wanted them to be symbols. It needed them to be symbols. But behind the screen, the feeling was just painfully human. And you realize, in that city, for those two, to love someone is to declare a war. Look, they could have run. They could have just vanished together and let the city deal with its own mess. But they don't. They choose something much, much more dangerous. They decide to face the very system that made their love impossible in the first place. So that night, separately, but in perfect sync, they both go live one last time. Noé doesn't defend himself. Instead, he exposes how this inherited hate is used as a political weapon. At the exact same time, Lina posts a video. She reveals who she is, the photographer, and then she turns her camera on the hypocrisy of her own powerful family. And you have to understand, their goal wasn't to save their relationship. That ship had sailed. The point was to send an echo of truth through the city's network, an echo that would still be there long after their story got buried by the next day's news. And that echo, it was heard. The Valmont political campaign completely collapsed. Its credibility was just gone. But something bigger shifted too. People, followers, started asking questions. Alliances broke. The system, just for a second, was forced to look in the mirror. No one really knows what happened to Noé and Lina after that. They were just gone. But months later, this mural appeared on a wall downtown. And the words underneath it? Well, they became the real final word on their story. It wasn't an act of destruction. It was an act of revelation. So their story leaves us here with this one big, lingering question. In a world where we all perform behind some kind of screen, where our identities are curated and our connections can be turned into weapons, what does the truth actually cost? And maybe more importantly, what are we willing to pay?